Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Coutney Morris, Assistant Professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Sonali.
2 days after key provisions of the USA Patriot Act expired, the Senate passed the USA Freedom Act by a vote of 67 to 32. The House had already passed it. President Obama signed it into law immediately. The Freedom Act is being characterized as the most significant reform to surveillance laws passed since 1978. Still, activist groups working to end surveillance see the move as only a small victory, given that the Freedom Act continues mass surveillance programs that are only slightly curtailed. Under the reform law, telecommunications companies will now oversee phone records rather than the NSA. Many see the passage of the law as symbolic, a vindication not just of public outrage over revelations that intelligence agencies watch our every move, but a vindication of NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, who revealed the extent of spying to the world and who remains a wanted man in the U.S. Courtney, how do you view the passage of this law?
Well, it seems to me that the general consensus is that this is a very positive development. I mean, the bill passed with a rare display of bipartisanship in both the House and the Senate. And I think that conservative defenders of the Patriot Act, like Mitch McConnell, really were surprised to learn how many of their own allies and constituents are really opposed to the practice of mass surveillance and sort of unregulated mass surveillance of citizens. And so in this sense, I think it is a good thing. But, really, what we have to remember here is that this isn't an eradication of mass surveillance. It's really just a reorganization of that program, and as well as the implementation of several regulations that will limit the ways that the government can access this information. But there are going to be many more battles to come in the future, particularly around access to private emails. And so this is really an important but a partial victory. And of course, the fact that Edward Snowden remains a fugitive of the law, despite the fact that now so many people seem to recognize that the program of mass surveillance was illegal and unconstitutional, is a deep irony.
And police shot and killed a Muslim man in Boston, Massachusetts yesterday. 26-year-old Usama Rahim was apparently under 24-hour FBI surveillance. He was shot by officers who say he lunged at them with a knife. Police Commissioner William Evans in a press conference said Rahim was, quote, wanted for some terrorist-related information we had received. He claimed that there was a surveillance video showing Rahim lunging at officers. The victim is the brother of a well-known Boston area imam named Ibrahim Rahim, who says his brother was shot 3 times in the back and was on the phone with their father when he was killed. His last words were, "I can't breathe." Muslim advocacy groups are demanding more information about why Usama Rahim was under investigation by the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, and they're also asking for the surveillance video of the shooting to be made public. Meanwhile, a man named David Wright was just arrested in Everest, Massachusetts, when his home was raided by police, and Wright is being linked to the same investigation. Courtney, I know that many questions remain on this breaking story, but what do you make at least of how the media are already reporting it as if it was an acceptable thing for police to shoot this man instead of questioning it?
Well, I mean, at this point, we really don't have, we've not seen any of the evidence that would confirm or corroborate the Boston Police Department's account of what took place. And the media seems to be more than willing to just take their word for it without insisting that that evidence be made available. And I think really the issue here is one of determining, one, whether the shooting was justified, and two, the larger question is whether Muslims living in the Boston area are being targeted and surveilled in ways that really violate their civil liberties. And so it seems to me, I'm not a police officer, but it seems to me that if one had caught a potential terrorist, you might want to sit down and actually talk to that person and bring them into custody alive. This seems to be, at the heart of good policing. But I think more and more what we're seeing is that the police live in our communities as a kind of military occupying force rather than as a force that's meant to serve and protect. So I think that before we can draw any judgments on what's taking place here, the Boston PD is really going to need to share more information and behave in a more transparent manner.
And finally, watchdogs nationally and internationally are speaking out about financial secrecy and violations of the public trust. Senator Elizabeth Warren issued a scathing letter to Mary Jo White, who heads the Securities and Exchange Commission. White is supposed to be Wall Street's top regulator, but according to Warren, she has failed to hold corporations accountable on issues like publishing CEO pay and issuing waivers of SEC reviews. Warren wrote, quote, "I am disappointed you have not been the strong leader that many hoped for and that you promised to be." Meanwhile, a group of UN experts have also written an open letter warning against the secrecy, shrouding negotiations over broad treaties like the Trans-Pacific Partnership and other trade deals. The group of experts worry that these treaties are likely to impact protect human rights, such as the right to food and water, a clean environment, good working conditions, and more. Specifically, they demanded that, quote, all draft treaties should be published so that parliamentarians and civil society have sufficient time to review them and to weigh the pros and cons in a democratic manner. Courtney, how important is it for civil society to see clearly what financial elites are doing?
It's crucial. I mean, we simply cannot, as a society, make decisions, informed decisions about our political leadership, about our public policy priorities, about the way that we believe that the free market should function without this kind of information. And I think if the secret mass surveillance program has taught us anything, it's that secrecy erodes public trust in the state. It also undermines the full practice of meaningful democracy. And so it is vital that the public know what's taking place and that agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is being negotiated in secret, be made transparent and public and subject to public intervention and input. Without that, we have no protections from the free market.
Courtney, thanks as always for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.
Bye, Sonali.
Coutney Morris is an assistant professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. This is Uprising. We'll be right back.